There are a lot of board games that come and go. Sometimes they appear in our peripheral vision and sometimes they're right in front of us and we try and push them out of the way because we've got so much going on in our lives. This is a video about games that I thought probably wouldn't be my thing, but then after playing that, they impressed me more than I thought. Hi, my name is Danny. I'm an avid modern board gamer from Australia who loves sharing my passion for this hobby with you, my friends and my family. Come and join me on this journey. Hey Danny, what did you think of that board game? I don't know. I haven't played it yet. Now what do you think? I still haven't played it yet. How about now? It was literally a minute ago since you last asked me. Now, as someone who really loves plants and has aquariums and tanks and pot plants around my house, I always gravitate towards games that have trees as part of its theme, and this next game is one that also sat on my shelf for ages, and that was because I had its predecessor game known as photosynthesis, which was all about collecting sunlight and then growing trees. And then that game kind of felt really cutthroat to me, and so when I played that at 4 players, I was like, this game is too vicious for trees. And so whilst I still have photosynthesis, it sits really high on that shelf up there. And so when this next game came along by the same designer, who was also inspired by finding a way to expand that tree light gathering theme, the game Evergreen really caught my attention. And I thought, ooh, should I give this game another shot? If photosynthesis was quite mean, will I like Evergreen? And Evergreen has a lot of the flavors and some of the mechanics that you'll recognize from the original game, but with some tweaks and changes. Now you've got this really cool like planet board with 6 different biomes, and each of the biomes matches up to different cards in a deck that players will be drafting from each and every round. And the cards that you draft are going to give you a power, and they're going to give you an action that you can use in that specified biome. So if I drew this kind of gardeny biome and I used a power for that, I could only do it in this region of my map. And so each of the 6 regions are like 6 small biomes that you're trying to grow trees in, so that at the end of the game, you can score for their fertility value. Now the fertility value comes from cards that are not picked at the end of the round. And at the end of each round, there will always be 1 card left over, and that card biome will get added to a fertility space, which will determine which of these biomes is going to be most fertile at the end of the game and will give you the most points. And so if you've got the most number of big trees in that biome, you'll be able to score, 4, 5, or 6 points for every big tree that you have in that high scoring fertile biome. End of every round, you're also scoring for the clusters of your biggest forest. You want to try and connect them all together, so you're creating this mega forest of trees that kind of collectively gather light and grow. Some of the rules from the original game do remain. This idea of blocking light based on the height of trees, that's still there, but because everyone's playing on a separate board now, it's only your trees blocking your trees, whereas in the previous version of the game, your trees would block other people's trees and their trees might block your trees, and that kind of was a little bit frustrating. And so as the sun moves around, you're going to gather light points, you're going to try and allow things to grow, and the card drafting element, which also gives you powers that you can upgrade, which are the 6 tracks at the top of the board, just means that you can just create a cool winning nature strategy. And I think Evergreen does replace photosynthesis to me. Not only does it feel more elegant, it looks super cool once you have all the pieces on, and it now even comes with this expansion, Pines and Cacti, which are 2 modules and which can be used to replace some of the biomes in, or some of the plant species in the game. And so Pines, I think, allows you to grow these pine trees. Cacti like to gather lots of sun but aren't very tall. So the combination of both the base game and this modular expansion just makes this a much more fruitful expedition when it comes to playing this cool game about growing your own forest. There are a lot of deduction style games that have really entered and sometimes exited my board game collection. There was one really cool deduction game that I got really early on when I was collecting games and buying games and looking for games that would suit different situations, and basically this game kind of just sat there for a while because it looked really abstract. You know, when you look at the back of a game box and you think, oh, where's the theme in this game? How does this game really work? And when you look at this game, you think, how does this game feel? Is it something that people are really going to want to play? And so I avoided taking this game to game nights or avoided setting it up. It also requires at least 3 players. So in order to enjoy this game, you do need a lot of players. And you need players who are actually focused as well. So I feel like this is probably why I haven't really played this as much as I would have liked. And so when I played this game for the first, second, and third time, yes, I did play this 3 times in a row, it really, really surprised me in a really positive way. The game I'm talking about is Crypted. Crypted is a game where everyone is given a clue or some parameters, which basically is like a third or a quarter of the clues that are all combined together at the table. So how this game works is, because everyone has a slice of the puzzle, by putting all of the clues together, it will focus you in on one specific location on the map where the cryptid monster is going to be hiding. Whoever finds that location first and searches that area will win the game. What I really love about this game is there's a little bit of deception in terms of trying to throw people off the track. On your turn, you can do one of 2 things, which is so simple, and that's basically asking another player, is the cryptid in the location that you've asked them? And based on their response, they're going to give you some information, either that cryptid is not there based on their clue, so it might be a clue about being next to the water. Based on how they answer your questions, you can make deductions about what their rule might be. And what's really cool here is that because some players have 1 or 2 parameters, you can kind of throw other players off the scent. And so you're still wondering, well, if that's what they answered for that question and that's what they answered for that question, how does it all work together? What do the rules mean? And when a player puts a disc on a location, it means it does match their parameter, and that gives you a whole set of different information for you to deduce. I just think this is such a tightly packed, short, strong punching game that really just gives you that feeling of deduction, but also satisfying fun, the level of interaction that really happens at the tables. Now, if you've followed me for a long time on this channel, you'll know that I absolutely love a midway Euro game. Any of the board and dice games, things like La Granja, Teotihuacan, Tekhenu, all of those games which have crunchy decisions but also have that point salady feeling to it, they're the sort of games that really get me excited and really get me engaged in. When this next game came along, first of all, I had to wait a long time to be able to get it, and it released quite early on in Europe, but then here in Australia it took ages to kind of arrive. And so I saw the game and I was like, oh, that's an intriguing cover, really liked the way it looked, and then I flipped on the back and I was like, oh, the board looks very rectangular, it looks kind of like a grid, and I was like, oh, this is pretty lukewarm in terms of initial visual impressions. And then I finally got the game, and it finally arrived 7 or 8 months after its initial announcement and release, and I played it. And it is probably the most combo-tastic, point-salady, positive effect-inducing Euro I've ever played. In fact, I think my final score ended up in around the 300s. It is a game called Barcelona. This game really just blew my socks off. I just love how the grid in the game is basically the outline for New Barcelona, so the brand new city. And basically the structure of buildings that you see here have all been planned to a T, not only in the way that they're laid out, but also the way they kind of synergize with each other with their internal gardens and pathways as well. What I really like is that you're building these roads, you're building intersections, you're placing citizens into housing, And depending on their class, it depends on the level of housing that gets built up. You've even got trams that travel around the map. But what is most ingenious about this game is the fact that when you take an action, you're looking at the intersections of the different roads. So the vertical action that aligns with the vertical road and one that aligns horizontally, the combo of the two actions together is what you get to do on your turn. And occasionally it may even line up with the diagonal road, which will give you a third action. And so what you'll find is that every time you do something, you get 2 or 3 different things. And those 2 or 3 different things help you to work towards a cool strategy. It might be covering the pavement, getting bonuses. It might be upgrading buildings or acquiring buildings. There's so many really cool moments in this game that really give you that sense that you are building and rebuilding a new version of Barcelona. And the colorful nature of the game really draws you in. In fact, it has this very warm and inviting feeling, which I think is really needed for a lot of Euros. I know one of my favorite point salad Euros is Batoko, and the theme of it really captures just how much fun and how much enjoyment I get out of the game. And I think Barcelona just really impressed me on that front. I've often said that the most simple games are sometimes the best games, especially ones that have layers. And when I talk about layers, I mean lots of things to really think about, but also different connection points in the game that lead you to other choices that you need to make. White Castle is a great example of taking one action, but having to think through 5 different separate actions to try and optimize the chain of actions that you're going to get. This next game has a theme where I've often bought games based on this theme, but not necessarily enjoyed them a lot. I bought games like Modern Art, which I haven't really played that much because it's too auction based. I've also really enjoyed like investigating the galleries, but never pulling the buy button because just of how intimidating like some Lacerda games are. And so when I see an art-based game, I think, am I ever going to play an art-based game if, you know, this theme is something that I want to engage with? And finally, this game has come along that really just changed my perspective. Not only was it simple to play, very approachable, but the puzzles has multiple connection points. The game I'm talking about is Art Society, not to mention how the cover itself has these recessed paneling sections. Basically, in this game, you're going to be bidding for paintings. And what's really interesting about this is that on your turn, you get to choose what paintings are up for auction. So if you know you need a particular size piece or a piece that needs to fit into your gallery wall, you're going to choose those ones. But what you're doing inadvertently is helping your opponent with their wall as well. And so you want to make sure that you put out pieces that you can win in a bid, but also your opponent doesn't win. And bidding just simply occurs with a deck of 20 cards, each with the numbers from 1 to 20. And every time you use a card, that card is removed from the game. What I really like about this game and how it's different from the other kind of art style games is it's this visual puzzle of trying to fit it all onto this rectangular wall. And you've got this eyeline space, which will give you extra bonus points for synergy at the end of the game. But what you're doing is you're trying to match common frames together. So you really want to match 2 frames that are identical together to get all these bonus effects and bonus points. And then you're also trying to not put the same type of painting next to one of another painting that's the same type, like 2 landscapes or 2 portraits. You're trying to avoid doing that. And so it becomes this spatial puzzle of not only the size of the paintings, the bidding that occurs for the paintings, the synergy of the frames, as well as the types. And so it creates this 4-point layered puzzle of how do I get all of these things to work for me? How do I get everything to, I guess, fit? And the tile piece that doesn't get chosen at the end of each round, that particular puzzle or art style type is going to start ascending the points track, and that particular painting type is going to get more value. So if no one chose the landscape painting type, that landscape painting type is going to become more valuable as the game progresses. And so at the end of the game, you still have to think, whoa, no one's drawn landscape tiles, but now I need to move into landscaping because that's what's most valuable and that's what's going to get me most points at the end. And those tiles are then sorted at the end and become multiplying factors for the 4 different painting types. There's a lot going on, but the turns are really snappy, they're short, they're sharp, and thinky. And that's what I love. Something that's really streamlined, really smooth, something that's gonna oil and grease the brain a little bit and just really give you that satisfying, short, punchy fun that just really impresses me because of not only its production, but its really smooth gameplay too. When I saw the cover of this next board game, I kind of just thought, ooh, this looks intriguing. And I kind of did a little bit of research. There wasn't a lot of information on the gameplay itself. And then I kind of read the rules and I thought, whoa, this sounds a little bit confusing. And so I avoided the game for a while. I kind of bookmarked it and didn't come back to it until I saw a Dice Tower playthrough of this game. And I thought, oh, I remember seeing that. And then I saw how the game actually worked. And even watching the playthrough, it kind of took me a while to get my head around just how the flow of the game operated. And I'm a huge fan of word deduction games like So Clover and Decrypto. And I'm always looking for a game that can really take that word deduction element to another level or into a new space. And I think this game just might give me that same yet much more gratifying feeling than even games like So Clover. This is a game called The Same Game. And yes, this game does that deduction a little bit differently to what you might expect. How this game really works is basically everyone is given a key object card, which they only know, and there are about 7 to 8 different categories, and you're given a number that matches with one of the 7 to 8 categories that are out for every game. What you've got to do is look at your object and then look at your category. You need to think of another object that really matches that object card that you've written or that you've been given to the category that you've been selected for. And so what will happen is on your turn in the game, the other players at the table will have to look at your two objects and see what makes them most similar. And they'll have to cancel out all of the other categories that they don't think that relates these two objects together. So it could be, for example, a Rubik's Cube and a box. Both of them are cubic shape. So everyone would need to eliminate all of the other categories except for maybe the shape category, and thereby giving the collective group as many points as possible. This provides for some extra layer of thinking, and also it really draws in your real world knowledge of what goes together. It reminds me of that feeling that you get when you do connections from the New York Times as you're trying to group and see how things connect together, and what the group might think connects together isn't what the clue giver thought connects together. There's some interesting categories that throw a few little spanners into the works, which I think really gives this game a lot of diversity and replay value. You've got things like frequency of use, importance to humanity, and you've got that spread amongst, the length of the object, the weight of the object, the volume of the object. So there's those mathematical yet more application-based uses for the objects. One board game that I really enjoyed playing with the hubby across the years is a Civilization card drafting style game called Imperial Settlers. I just loved playing as the Egyptians or as the Romans or as the Japanese, and each deck kind of had its own flavor, and you kind of incorporate other cards from the common deck into your civilization to build a really cool engine of creating resources, producing workers, raiding each other's kind of cards, and then also generating a victory point engine. What really drew me into that game was how differently each deck played out, how differently each faction played out, and just how positive some of the interactions were. Not to mention the fact that each card was multifunctional. You could tuck cards in, you could use the cards in all these different ways by sliding them out as features, and some of the cards even had actions on them for you to tap them for extra abilities each round. And so every round kind of grew and grew and grew and felt like a bigger and bigger game. And I love games that kind of crescendo as you get further into it. And so when this next game came along, I was like, ooh, I like it because it's linked to something I'm really familiar with, but is it better than what I really love about the original game? And I still got it because I just knew the original game was so great. This game probably would be something I'd enjoy playing. But is it warranted for owning both games? I don't know. But this game has been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years. Sad face, I know. But I finally got to play a couple of times, and yes, oh boy, this one really impressed me So much so that I think it definitely surpasses the original, and it is Empires of the North. In Empires of the North, there are some changes to the gameplay. Each faction has its own deck, and you don't even need to build the deck. You literally pull the deck out, place out your fields, and then you start playing. There is an added element of deploying boats to nearby islands and faraway islands, and when you conquer those islands, you can then add those islands to your tableau, which give you bonus actions. You can also pillage the islands to get resources, and here the workers are what give you extra actions. And so if you increase the number of people in your civilization, you're going to get more actions. And so each deck works functionally and thematically very differently. There's one faction here that's all about boats, and another faction all about creating an economy within your tableau. And this game is a game where every time you place a card out, your deck gets thinner and thinner, and so those cards that are deeper in your deck are eventually going to get played. And the size of this game just starts off really small, but then quickly ascends to this game where it literally takes up the entire table. It's this massive table hog, but it's such a satisfying and gratifying experience. This is a game I'd probably only play at 2, mainly because there's so much that can happen in the game and so much going on. And I really like the fact that they've taken away the 5 rounds from the original game and made it 25 victory points, because it just meant that you can kind of build your engine and really see your deck grow. So what did you think of those board games? Have you played any of them? I'd love to hear your comments, your stories, and your opinions about your experiences with board gaming. It really helps us to build a sense of community as well as connect with each other. Now, if you really enjoyed the content that you saw in this video, please consider subscribing and liking this video, as well as following me on Patreon if you really want extra exclusive content. Now, there are hundreds of other board game videos that I have on this channel, so feel free to explore and find a game that you might like. Otherwise, I'll see you in my next video, and I can't wait to chat to you soon. Goodbye!